Welcome to the Atheist Connection. I'm your host Phil J, and I'll be making videos that'll address certain religious and theistic topics and claims from my atheist perspective. But before we get started, I thought it'd be best to define some terms and clarify some positions that I hold so there's less chance of confusion or misunderstanding. So to start, let's define atheism. Well, firstly, it's not an ism, though we do use the word colloquially. Atheists don't have any dogma or creed or tenets or atheist texts. It's just an answer to a single claim or question. There is a God or gods. I don't believe that. Or, do you believe a God or gods exist? No, I don't. It's colloquially referred to as atheism to easily summarize a demographic. For example, when people refer to non-believers when discussing the religious demographics of the world. Atheist is the umbrella label that all forms of non-belief fall under, provided they strictly maintain a non-belief in God or gods. The only way you can fail as an atheist is to hold a belief in a God. There's quite a few labels for non-believers, typically because people are uncomfortable referring to themselves as atheists, because religions around the world have spent a great deal of time either demonizing or disparaging those who adopt the term. Hence we end up with agnostic, which I'll go over later, freethinker, scientism, skeptic, which has also been framed to be a bad thing, which is patently absurd, humanist, apatheist, maltheism or misotheism, hatred of God, which depending on how you're using I'd either agree or disagree with. Even some forms of pantheism and deism fall under atheism. If you're not fully convinced of a God, you're an atheist of some variety or another. Non-theist, aka non-believer. But, as I've pointed out, it can vary greatly based on your own personal convictions and experiences, which is one reason I want to help all non-believers adopt the one atheist label. And just to be clear, when I say non-believer, I'm referring to those who don't believe in a God or gods. I'm not implying someone or some group who hold no beliefs at all. We atheists need to drop other labels and be proud that we don't believe in supernatural bullshit. That it's perfectly normal not to believe in a claim until it's been demonstrated. Sam Harris once said, "I think that atheist is a term that we do not need, in the same way we don't need a word for someone who rejects astrology. We simply do not call people non-astrologers. All we need are words like reason, evidence, common sense, and bullshit to put astrologers in their place." And so it could be with religion. Though I agree with him in part, yes, it would make sense if the demographics of theist-atheists were more 50-50. Unfortunately, a majority of the world believe in a God or gods. When belief in gods eventually becomes fringe thinking like astrology, then we can do without the label. Until then, we need a label to help differentiate ourselves from the masses. By avoiding the label that best describes your position, you set up a confusing precedent and do a disservice to the movement worldwide, as we end up with a false representation of demographics, and we need as many out atheists as possible. It's like the gay movement years ago. Many didn't, and still don't, like the gay label, and that's fine, that's their preference. But when you're trying to unite people against oppression and or trying to get recognized in some fashion or some sense of equality, uniting together under the one easily understandable label is going to do more to further your cause than adopting a whole bunch of other varying ones. If you combine all the different labels that equate to the same thing, atheism, or non-believers, is the fastest growing demographic in the world, whereas global church attendance is continuing to shrink. They're losing the fight, and it's not to political battles or exposés or some secret plot from the atheists, but to simple logic, reason, rationality, and skepticism. As Dan Dennett would say, thank goodness. A weak atheist, also referred to as soft or negative atheism, is like saying, I don't believe a God or gods exist, whereas a strong atheist, also referred to as hard or positive atheism, is like saying, I believe gods don't exist. Clearly there's a big difference between I don't believe in a God or God exists, and I believe a God or gods don't exist. One of these is making a positive claim, which they would then need to demonstrate. And unless you can prove that no God exists anywhere in, or in some cases beyond the universe, if there is such a thing as beyond the universe, then you're not rationally justified in stating this claim. You can use this label in some instances, however, because it depends on which God claim you're addressing. Some are demonstrably false, like Zeus and Thor, from ancient myth, which is one strong-held ancient beliefs. We don't need a God to explain lightning. Funny how, as soon as we understand something, the God did it explanation dies, and the long-held belief becomes myth. An implicit atheist is basically a person who doesn't believe in a God or gods, but hasn't consciously rejected such a belief. Like those who've never heard of a concept of a certain deity or god, or like me with regards to all the deities I've never heard of, or like children who have never heard of or been introduced to the God concept at all yet. They don't believe because they don't know. They're not consciously disbelieving. An explicit atheist is someone who's consciously disbelieving in a god or gods or their existence. An easy way to think of it is, explicit atheists can be weak or strong atheists, but all strong atheists are explicit atheists, and so I fall under the explicit weak atheist label. There's often some confusion surrounding the agnostic atheist positions, with some people thinking they're synonymous with each other or conflating their meanings to deliberately blur the line, so to speak. It's this simple. Gnosticism addresses knowledge. Atheism addresses belief. If I say I know something, I'm expressing Gnosticism. If I don't know something, I'm expressing agnosticism. This is why I'm an agnostic atheist. No, this doesn't mean I don't know if I'm an atheist or not. It means I don't know if a god or gods exist or not. But I don't believe, atheists, that any do. Similarly, you can be an agnostic theist, don't know a god exists, but believe one does. Or a Gnostic atheist, you know and believe gods don't exist. Or a Gnostic theist, you know and believe God or gods exist. Depending on the claim, I may in fact be a Gnostic atheist, as there are some proposed gods that are either demonstrably false and or contradictory. Some simply go by agnostic when asked about their belief in a god, which, as I pointed out, isn't speaking to their beliefs. It's just saying, I don't know. If you're not convinced, you're an atheist. There's no middle ground here. We don't maybe believe. So unless someone adds to their agnosticism by stating their belief, we assume they're an atheist, because the default position for any claim is to not believe until it's been demonstrated. This is what's referred to as the null hypothesis, which I'll address later in another video. So why do I label myself an agnostic atheist? Because if I adopt the position of knowing Gnostic atheist, then I'm also adopting a positive position that I then need to demonstrate. In other words, I'd have to demonstrate a god or gods don't exist, which I can't do. This is what's known as an unfalsifiable position. It can't be falsified. If it's unfalsifiable, it's usually untestable or worse, uninvestigable, much like people's god assertions. Just like you can't demonstrate my magical unicorn doesn't exist somewhere, we can discern its likelihood or probability, but unless we pretend to know everything, we're stuck. Maybe there is a god or gods out there somewhere, but I don't believe there are. I ration my beliefs to the evidence. The more extraordinary the claim, god or gods or magical unicorn exists, the more extraordinary the evidence will need to be to convince me. The one thing I can't do is believe with no evidence. Let me explain. We don't begin by believing claims until they're proven or demonstrated, or we'd believe everything put forward to us including contradictory claims. Those who do believe without evidence are displaying irrational thinking. We also don't choose our beliefs. You're either convinced or you're not. Here's an example. If I told you I have a Toyota Highlander parked outside my house, you probably won't have any problem believing this claim. It's a car, lots of people own cars. It's not an extraordinary claim and certainly not in any meaningful way. If I told you I had a flying DeLorean, however, you'd probably want proof, and rightly so. This is worse with theist God claims, because it'd be an invisible flying DeLorean that no one created, that created itself and the universe, knows everything, and exists outside space and time. And theists wonder why I don't believe. Generally speaking, the anti-theist label describes a person who believes theism and religion are dangerous beliefs and should be abandoned, as they're harmful to both people and society. It's also been referred to as militant atheism, though this heavily depends on the person and their views and their personality. It's sometimes looked upon as anti-religion or even anti-God. I too adopt the anti-theist label in that I agree that religions around the world poison societies and people's thinking, and drive us apart with their outdated, divisive teachings. And what I hope for is a world where belief in gods is a distant memory, that all religions follow their predecessors into myth, and we come together through secular humanistic means of morality, cooperation, and critical thinking. Christopher Hitchens once said, "I not only maintain that all religions are versions of the same untruth, but I hold that the influence of churches and the effect of religious belief is positively harmful." Even if a theist were to present something true, if it comes via their religion, the anti-theist tends to believe they've come to a true conclusion via a bad or flawed methodology. Just because you got something right doesn't mean your method of getting there is reliable, especially if it can get you anywhere. The church throughout the years has demonized atheists and the atheist label, filling the public landscape with a false picture of what an atheist is, to the point where almost every theist I meet has an inaccurate concept of the term, and some truly think we're basically demon spawn or lost souls working for the devil. This is just a religion's rhetoric echoing through them like a puppet to protect both their belief and the truth of their church. The best we can do as atheists is to defy this stereotype that they've been indoctrinated with by continuing to be our everyday selves, upstanding, respectful citizens, breaking their belief and expectations by being a normal human being. Not that hard, but then not eating babies and raping and killing is pretty easy. And yes, there are some asshole atheists, just like there's asshole theists. The world doesn't suddenly become less asshole-ridden because we lose our belief in gods. Religions create an image of atheists for people to rail against, to despise and shun. It's easy to look down on or even hate a monster you've been constantly warned about and had vilified. It's harder to demonize your average Joe who lives down the street. And it's priceless sometimes to see the look on theists' face when the topic of God or gods comes up, and I advise them of my atheist position. They have trouble reconciling this seemingly nice guy with no ulterior motive with the evil thing they've constructed in their mind. This is why it's important to have as many out atheists as possible, not only to show just how widespread atheism is, or, as I mentioned earlier, remove the confusion surrounding the label, but to show believers this is normal, and what they've been told is a lie. I'm certainly not advocating for making certain beliefs illegal. On the contrary, 1, I don't believe in thought crime, and 2, I want people's beliefs to mirror reality as accurately as possible. Or as Matt Dillahunty would say, I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. And if this means phasing out some notions of God, so be it. But that's it for this video, and don't listen to me. Go out and find out for yourselves. Our beliefs, if true, have nothing to fear from scrutiny.